Welcome to the Screaming Blackbird podcast. In this show, we will talk with military officers and professional leaders to explore Air Force careers and engage in leadership dialogue. The Screaming Blackbird podcast is created by the cadets at Air Force ROTC, Detachment 605 at North Carolina A&T State University. The contents of this show are for educational and entertainment purposes only. They do not contain any official information nor opinions of Air Force ROTC or North Carolina A&T State University.
Appreciate you guys. See ya. See ya. Morning, Matt. How are we doing?
Doing well. How are you, Jackson?
Good. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well. You are.
Welcome back, everybody, to episode 19 of the Screaming Blackbird podcast. I am your host, Cadet Jackson Willis, and today I'm joined by Lieutenant Redbord, an alumni of Detachment 605 and a student pilot here at Columbus Air Force Base. How's it going, Matt?
Doing well. Doing well. Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here doing the podcast today. I started this podcast during my senior year at ROTC, and one of the biggest things, one of my big goals for this podcast was just to leave something behind after I left the detachment. And so to see you guys picking up right where I left off and keeping this thing going, now me being on the other side of things, getting interviewed, I think it's super cool, and I'm really excited to do this today.
Coming full circle.
Sweet. Awesome.
All right, Matt. So for the listeners who do not know you, would you give a quick 60 to 90 second run up on your upbringing and your career up to this point?
Sweet. Yeah, so Lieutenant Matt Redbord. I was born and raised in New Jersey, down the shore area. I went to college at High Point University, a small school in North Carolina, same school as you. We both did ROTC at North Carolina A&T State University. I earned my commission of May of 2022, so about a year and a half now. Went on active duty in January of 2023, so I've been on active duty almost a year now, and I started pilot training back in August, so about 4 months. It's been going well so far, having a blast. Like Jackson said, we're here at Columbus Air Force Base right now. We got the T6 runway right behind us, but as we go out through this episode, I'm sure we'll see T6s on final. We'll see some T38 and T1s taking off. Should be an exciting episode, and I'm here. I'm excited to be here with you.
Let's go. A lot of people asked me when I told my parents I want to join RTC, when I want to join the military. A lot of friends and family said, why are you doing this? And that's kind of the question I want to ask you, but I want to ask you a little bit more in depth. We've got 4 whys for you, okay? First why, why'd you join the military? Second why the Air Force? Then why ROTC? And then why pilot?
Yeah, and I like the way you asked that question, because that's sort of how my progression into ROTC, into where I'm at right now, kind of happened. First off, I always grew up with being in Boy Scouts, so leadership and service has always been, a big part of my life. I finished up Scouts, finished up on my Eagle Scout project in my junior year of high school, and so my senior year I just really wasn't in Scouts, and I kind of felt like a part of me was missing. What I realized is that I no longer had that leadership and service aspect that I always fell back on with Scouts in my life. And so as I'm getting ready to apply for colleges and trying to pick a school, my dad introduced me to ROTC and really more broadly the military. He's like, hey, do you think this is something you want to do? And I said, yeah, military is something that I want to do, but I knew I wanted to go to college. So it started off with, all right, I think I want to go into the military, and then I also want to go to college. All right, now the best route is probably going to be ROTC, but first off, what branch? We're going to do Army, Air Force, Navy, all that kind of stuff. The service academies were never really in my realm of opportunities. It was too late by the time I was interested in military to apply, so that wasn't anything I was considering. But yeah, I was really talking to a lot of veterans, a lot of people on active duty, and really just peers or family friends and whatnot who had served, and I would ask them about their experiences, what branch they thought was best, ask them about some of their jobs and their experiences. And overwhelmingly, everybody said go Air Force. Whether that came from Army, a Marine, Navy, or Air Force, most of them said go Air Force. And they just said that branch takes care of their people the best lifestyle, best resources, best facilities, best bases. They say every Air Force base is built with a golf course in it, so that's kind of cool, and I like the golf. So yeah, that definitely contributed to my decision for sure. So yeah, we talked about why military, why Air Force, why ROTC? Yeah, it's just because I was going to college and I want to come out of college going right into the military. I want to be an officer too. That seemed like the best path for me. Um, so that's kind of how I led into ROTC. I mean, OTS was an opportunity, but not one I actually really considered. I knew it was there, but ROTC seemed a little better. Um, and then and then why pilot? Really, why I wanted to be a pilot probably boils down to good mentorship. My detachment commander, when I was a senior in college, he was a or excuse me, when I was a freshman in college, he was a pilot, and so he kind of pushed us in that direction. He pushed for a lot of the pilot training programs that RTC has to offer, like the You Can Fly scholarship, or I was on like the ACES flying scholarship, which I'm not sure if that's still a thing anymore, but it was just like a little flight training that you could do through ROTC. And so once I had realized I was in my realm of possibilities to become a pilot, and I had my commander putting me up for those different opportunities, I was like, yeah, that sounds pretty cool. I think that's definitely something I want to do. And I knew that I did not want to just do a job behind a desk. I wanted to go out there and do something with my hands. So as I kind of as I went on through my ROTC experience, and I started to do well with drill and ceremonies, and had a good GPA and PFA and all that, and I really realized that being a pilot was a real possibility for me, and I would be able to compete for a pilot slot. I was just all gung ho about it, and from there, got my pilot slot in the end of my junior year, and senior year got to wear the flight suit, which was super cool and super exciting, and I got to talk to more pilots about what it's actually like being a pilot in the Air Force. And um, fast forward 2 years after that, and here I am starting out pilot training.
Awesome. So talk about those 2 years. You graduated, you commissioned in May of 22, and did you go straight to pilot training, or what really happened after school?
Yeah, so what was true for me is not exactly what I understand true to be now, or what was even true for the last class who commissioned in 2023. But for me, I graduated in 2022, and I didn't get my active duty orders until January of 23. So do a quick public math, that's like 7 or 8 or 9 months of just being a civilian. So you pin on the second lieutenant, and the Air Force recognizes you as a second lieutenant, but I'm not on active duty. I don't have a job. I'm not getting paid. Um, the Air Force says basically show up at Columbus in January, but until then, you're off the hook. So it was up to me to go live life as a civilian for a little bit. I lived in Charleston, South Carolina. I was actually a restaurant server, just enjoying my time by the beach and making the most of my free time while I could before I started active duty and kind of lit my hair on fire. Here we go. We got our first T6 coming in here.
There we go.
That'd be cool.
On final approach. These T6s come in hot, don't they?
Yeah, they come in pretty aggressively. So standard, just a quick aside, standard approach normally coming in on field is about 3 degrees, and it's typically straight in. But here to get really work on our airmanship and our stick and rudder skills, we practice coming in at about a 4 degree glide slope, so a lot steeper, and we do it as a turning final approach. So it's kind of cool. So we'll see that all day today.
Wow.
But back to what we were talking about. Yep. So I finished up my civilian time and went on active duty in January. Um, I was a little bit of an average circumstance in that I had to go to initial flight training, IFT. So basically, if you don't have your private pilot's license before you start UPT, undergraduate pilot training, you have to go out to the Air Force's version of getting you up to a private pilot's license, and that's IFT. They send you out to Pueblo, Colorado. It's about a 6-week program, give or take. And you go out, you fly the 120 horsepower DA-20, basically a glider with a little engine on it. And yeah, they teach you how the military flies. And despite it being a really weak aircraft, the military training that they give you in terms of pilot training is really good. It really gets you ready for UPT. And you really see that when you start UPT and you talk to some of your classmates who did not go to IFT. They kind of start a little bit behind the power curve. Sure, their piloting skills are just as good, if not better than yours, but you understand how the military works in terms of pilot training and how to actually fly along with Air Force rules, and it's just very different. and so that is a little bit advantageous. So it's why when I talk to cadets or talk to someone like yourself, um, I recommend not going for the private pilot's license and go ahead and go out to IFT. It's a really good experience. So yep, I did that for 6 weeks. That was in February of this past year, and then I was waiting a good 5 months or so until I started pilot training. So this is true today, and this is true at most bases. Um, if you are at a UPT base and you're waiting for your class start date, they have you on what's called casual status. And basically, what that means is you're an extra set of hands on base and you're basically a volunteer. It's more so you get voluntold to do things, but you get assigned to different squadrons of bound base and you help them out where they're short manned and you get to do some pretty cool jobs. For me, I was part of the first group that got sent over to security forces. So I got to live life as a defender, and I got to work with a lot of young enlisted, which was a really cool, really rewarding experience because, as pilots, we don't really get to work with enlisted, maybe until we're in a heavy aircraft working with a crew. But that won't even be until 5 years, maybe, until you get to that point in your pilot career. So that was cool. I got to do that and got to see just a totally different side of the Air Force. As a pilot, we'll be in the ops side of things, but Security Forces Mission Support Group. So I got to understand how EPRs and OPRs actually work, especially for MSG squadrons. And I got to live life as a defender, like I said. Like those guys, they work their tail off. I mean, they work 12, 13-hour days, 5 days a week, and they're out there on the gate, keeping this base safe when it's cold out, when it is warm out. They're out there. So I tip my hat to them and have all my respect to them, and that was a really cool experience. And I would say it was a heavier job um, in terms of casual jobs. Like a lot of people, they have to report to work for maybe 4 hours a day, maybe 3 to 4 days a week, and so they're really not doing a whole lot as a casual. Your priority is to get ready to fly. So yep, that's what I did until August of this past year, and then I started up pilot training in August.
Cool. So for most folks, when they join college, they come in as freshmen, they join ROTC. It's a huge change. They're moving away from home. They got a new place to live. They got left all their friends, and they got to learn all this stuff while maintaining good grades in college. Is that kind of how it is at pilot training when you graduated and came? What was the culture shock like?
Yeah, honestly, like showing up to base, when I first EAD'd, entry active duty, that's EAD. It was like showing up to college freshman year. Showing up in a new place, you're moving away from home again. You're bringing everything, your whole life with you. I literally brought a U-Haul and towed my car back to it, and I packed everything in it. And so, said goodbye to my parents for a little while and fully moved out of the house. So that was an interesting experience. Then you get to base, and I had known one person on this base before I got here, and definitely used him as a resource, 100% to just answer a lot of the, basic second lieutenant questions. Quick aside here again. When you in process, you have a lot of things that you just don't know. You just don't understand a lot of things in the military, um, like what even is an MPF, which is military personnel flight, where you do a lot of paperwork. Um, and so you kind of just show up at these different squadrons, and you're like completely like lost and confused. And at this base, because we have so many second lieutenants who are going through pilot training, they just know if they see a second lieutenant walking around, they are probably lost. So they kind of coined the term or the phrase, "You can't spell lost without LT." So you hear that a lot when you first in process. But yeah, I mean, there's so much that you don't know, and you're trying to figure out what is SGLI, what is the VA loan, what's a VRED, what's all these different things, and it's things that cadets really don't need to worry about until you get on active duty. But the cool thing that was maybe a little bit shocking to me was that when you first in process, and at least this was true for me, I in process with a lot of other ROTC cadets who were also pretty much my age. They were all a bunch of guys, and we right off the bat had so much in common. We had so much to talk about. Like even though these guys are complete strangers, like we have had such similar experiences going through ROTC. Like people were like, "Oh, what was your wing commander time like?" Or "What did you do at field training? What year did you go there?" And right off the bat, you guys have like so much you could talk about, and that connection piece of your peers really brings you closer to them a lot faster. So I thought making friends here in the military was a lot easier than when I first got to college. But for sure, it's definitely a culture shock. I mean, you're moving into a new area too. Columbus is a little bit of a little more off the map than any other place that I've lived. I've lived down the shore area in New Jersey, which was very city-like, and even where I went to college at High Point, very city-like compared to what I'm at now. But we have a house off base, and it's you kind of drive by some farms on the way out there, and it's a beautiful countryside, and I really come to like it. So definitely different, definitely a lot of adapting, but it has been great, and a very similar experience as to a first year freshman.
Awesome. Let's talk about some of those friends that you've made here, your pilot buddies, the other uh, trainee pilots that are here. When you join there, are they all men? Are they all women? Do they all have the same commissioning source as you? What is the culture like? Is it very competitive? Or are you guys working together? How is it?
Yeah, lot of things to dive in there with that question. We could talk about the gender ratio. I think I was a little surprised at actually how many females I see, like just sort of walking around the T6 building or just like in our class or whatever. I was under the impression maybe you get one or two females per class, but my class had three, and we had like a smaller ratio of females relative to other classes. So it's really cool to see the female population growing for sure. When I in process though, yeah, like I in process with a group of about 6 or 7 of us, and we were all guys. Those guys were all ROTC guys, and I think that's true because a lot of the academy graduates, this was something I didn't know until I got on active duty. Academy guys are all active duty as soon as they start um, their time as a freshman at the academy. So they graduate in May of their commissioning year. They get 60 days of leave, and then they're on active duty, starting their job, like their no kidding job. So they don't get that break that I got, and they go right on active duty. Some could see that as an advantage, some could see that as a disadvantage. It's really life circumstances depending. Um, so they mainly in process at the end of the summer, and so every year at the end of summer here, you get an big influx of academy people, and then when it's not that time, you get a big influx of ROTC and OTS throughout the year. But OTS grads are very few and far between. ROTC and the academy are definitely the bigger commissioning sources, especially as pilots. So that's the demographics for when I am processed. And then culture, I didn't really understand the pilot training culture as a casual because I really wasn't in that environment. It wasn't really, honestly, it wasn't really until about a month ago that I actually got to the flight line and started flying that I really got a taste of pilot culture. I guess more specifically pilot training culture, and it's been great. I didn't expect it to be as laid back as it was. Coming out of ROTC, it's very, it's military officer training, so it's very regimented. It's very serious. It's very professional and locked on, and every you call everyone sir and ma'am who you see in the hallway and whatnot. But in the pilot training culture, a lot of that is still true. Like customs and courtesies of professionalism and saluting your officers, still there, but it's much more laid back. Like you may say good morning, sir, and he'd be like, hey, what's up, dude, or something like that. And so I think that they do that so you feel like you're a part of the team, like you feel like you're one, and there's a sense of belonging there, which I think is great. And I think that chilled, laid back culture is even more true when you go onto your follow-on airframes. When you go to the T1s or T38s, they're even more laid back, and they're even more worried about making you a part of the team and getting you better each day. It's not meant to be a haze. It's meant to, hey, you're one of us. Let's get you through this program. Let's get you your wings so you can go fly for the Air Force. And then I think a last piece of that question, you said, is it competitive?
Yeah.
To a certain extent, it's competitive. Everyone has, I think, in the back of their minds, like, hey, at the end of the day, there's X amount of slots that, people, you have a group of 10 guys that want T38 slots or that want a T38, and maybe there's only 5 slots available. Some people think that they're competing against each other, but in reality, that's just not the case. Um, you're competing against the syllabus. You're competing against people from all the other bases. So you really don't feel like that the guy flying next to you is really, a threat at all. We don't think that way at all. And ultimately, if you think bigger picture, none of that really makes sense because we're all here to be pilots for the United States Air Force, for the military. We're all here to make our country stronger, right? So what we want as individuals, like what aircraft we get, ultimately doesn't matter, big picture speaking. What matters is that we become good pilots and that we get really good training and that we work together really well as a team to reach that goal. And so if you're going through pilot training thinking that, hey, I got to be better than the next guy, it's just the wrong mentality to have. You want to have the mentality, we're all trying to get better as a team, and we all are going to get better, and we may even get more T-38 slots if we all do better. And that only works when you're working together. And you really do see that in the flight rooms. I mean, how pilot training basically works is you sit in a flight room for 8 to 12 hours each day with all your buddies that you're flying with, and you're basically bouncing off each other all day long. You're asking them questions. Hey man, like I know you went out to Tupelo recently. Can you tell me about that departure and the procedures that you had to do for that? Or like I know you said you messed this up yesterday. Can you talk to me about that and maybe something I can learn from your mistake? And there's something we do. It's There's if you make like an incorrect radio transmission or you make a mistake in the pattern, basically everyone knows about it because it's documented. And each morning we have some slides come up and it says which call sign made which mistake. So in our morning briefings, we have to get up in front of the room and say, hey, I was so an example here is I was spike 2-3. I made this mistake, and here's how you don't make this mistake. So it's a really humbling experience, and just doing that really knocks down the barriers of, hey, no one's better than anyone else here. We're all just trying to get better. So that's kind of how I've seen the culture in terms of the competitive nature of it. And I think that's the right mentality to have.
Awesome. Quick touch and go by that T6 is
Yeah.
getting the work in early in the morning.
Yeah, just like that. If he stays in the pattern, he can be up here. We'll see him about every 3 minutes or so.
Awesome.
Those landings.
So you said two things there that I want to touch on. One was mentality, and the second one was locked on versus locked off, being able to switch it on and off. Let's go to mentality first. You had a pretty illustrious career in ROTC. You were DG for both, distinguished graduate for both field training and ROTC itself. You were on scholarship. You got one of those coveted pilot slots. What do you think attributed to that mentality, or when did you really switch it on or figure out that this is the way to go to be successful in this program?
Yeah, it really started early in my freshman year. When I was in high school, I remember having a distinct thought, seeing my high school graduation, and they're listing off all these people who got all these awards and whatnot, and I was not one of them. I was a average student at best. I did what I needed to do to get in college, and to get by, but I didn't push myself as hard as I could have. I didn't put enough effort in as much as my potential held. And so I remember thinking like I want to try a lot harder when I get to college. I want to push the limits of what I can do, and I want to really reach my full potential. So right off the bat, freshman year, I set a goal for myself of having at least a 3.8 GPA. I want to do as best I can, as close to a 100 on the PFA as I could. And I just want to show up every day, whether it's in class or it's on RTC, or I did some other extracurriculars, and do the best that I could possibly do. And so I would think to myself constantly, like, is there something I could be doing more right now? Something I could be doing better? Each morning I'd wake up and plan out my day, and hey, I see I got this meeting. Is there something I can do to prepare to make sure that meeting goes most effectively? Or I got this test tomorrow. I budgeted 2 hours to study, but maybe do I need 3, or should I do 2 1 hour? Like I was always constantly thinking, what can I be doing better? And I think that's an important mentality to have if you want to be a high performance person.
He's back.
Yeah,
That's
so
awesome.
people watching see the time. If he was in a close battle goal, it's probably about 3 minutes by. Let's see, where were we? Mentality with high performing stuff. Yeah, so it's I think setting goals, setting high goals is really important. It's a cliche saying, but I think it's super true. Is if you shoot for the moon, if you miss, you might be amongst the stars. And I mean, that's true. If you're trying to get a 3.8 GPA and you got a 3.7, which is actually what happened my first semester freshman year, 3.7 is a great GPA. That will, I mean, other things considering, that will be good enough to get you a pilot slot. And so, really setting the bar high for yourself and knowing that you are capable, regardless of what you may think. You're capable to do whatever you set your mind to. 100%. I think there's so much truth to that, and we can dive into more of that if you want. But I think that's really, those were the main things that hit on the high performance kind of stuff that I had success with.
The other thing I wanted to talk about was locked on, locked off nature. And I had an interesting story of when I joined RTC. So at High Point, you were a senior and I was a junior. But in RTC, I had just joined. It was spring of my junior year, and I was brand new to the program. I think it was one of my first ever leadership labs, and I showed up. You were supposed to drive me home, but my classmates told me I had aerospace studies class, and I had to stay an extra hour. Let this guy go by real quick. So you come to pick me up, and you're like, Cadet Willis, let's go. And I looked, and I was like, excuse me, sir, may I say something? I gotta stay. They can take me home. And I think I had a little bit of pee dribbling down my leg, and it was really nerve-wracking. And so you're like, okay, bye. And you left. And since I was new to the program, I didn't know like how to lock it on versus lock it off. I'd only seen you as like a mentor answering questions, being a friend at High Point. And so later in my RTC career, I kind of figured out that it's great to be able to switch it on, lock it off, be serious, and then lock it off and be a bro or be a friend to somebody. Is that what you experience here? Do you guys take your job really seriously, but then take yourselves not so seriously?
Yeah, I think it's important. Yeah, a lot of things we can dive into that. I think it's important to take yourself very seriously when you need to, and then to be able to give yourself grace and know when to laugh at yourself when you make some dumb mistakes. And anyone going through pilot training will make a lot of dumb mistakes. And if you're not laughing at yourself, well, you might just be miserable because you're going to make a lot of mistakes. So, locked on versus locked off. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a time and place for both. As cadets, as POC versus GMC. At the end of the day, you're all cadets. You're all working towards those gold bars. So yeah, there is a little bit of a hierarchy. There's some flight commanders versus GMC and whatnot, but you have to know that you guys are all just college students. You're all just cadets trying to get to the same eventual goal, um, and uh, and like there's a time and a place to call your peer sir, and a time and a place to be like, hey, what's up, bro? And that's true on active duty. So like we have our flight commander, and I will treat him with respect 100 or 10 out of 10 times. I'll call him sir, but he may be like, hey man, or hey bro, like I got something for you, and maybe you might say hey bro back or something like that if that's what they give you. Maybe you'll be on a first name basis with them. Um, the one thing I will say to that is when you're leading people who are your subordinates or people who are underneath you on the chain of command, it's important to set a initial precedence of high professionalism early and first and foremost, because as soon as you start calling them bro and man, and you're a little bit more laid back, then they feel more laid back, and that's how they will treat you going forward. So if you set a high precedence early, it's a lot easier to become more laid back than to get more serious. So like it's easier to dial it back than to ramp it up. And just by you may lose a little bit of credibility if you are known as that one laid back person who may not be the super strict leader. So I always think it's important to set a early and high professionalism precedence, and then dial it back from there. And you definitely get that a lot in RTC. Like you're gonna have a lot of instances when you show up at Leadership Lab and you're calling all of your POCs sir, ma'am, and then the next day you guys will go do like a weekend volunteer event, and I'll be like, hey man, just call me Matt. Like I'm just Matt, I'm just another college student just like you, and we're all just kind of going through this thing together. So.
Coming in hot. We got T1s taking off on the far, and T6s landing on the near. That's awesome. So let's go back to pilot training. So we hear horror stories about it being grueling 12-hour days, and you can't see your family, you can't have any life outside of it. Is that the truth, or is that there's some balance to your life now?
Disclaimer, they say it's 12-hour days as a pilot, but in reality, it's 12 hours days max. You can't go over working 12-hour days. Now, they will push you right to that 12-hour days many times, but that's not always the case. I'd say average, we probably are in the squadron about 10 hours a day. And when I first started pilot training, the academics phase, it was way less than that. And I was doing a lot of self-study at home where I really had nowhere to be outside of that time. So when you get to the flight line, you get assigned to a flight room, and every flight room has different rules of engagement. We call those ROEs, if you've heard them. We have different ROEs for how we conduct our training and how many hours a day we have to spend at the squadron. But at the very most, it's always 12 hours. Average day for me on the flight line starts typically pretty early. We average show times typically 5:30 in the morning. We have about a 10 to 15 minute brief where we talk about basic things we need to know for the day, such as the weather, the different airfield notes. We'll talk about whether there's thunderstorms, the winds, the clouds, if there's any notices to air missions. In the aviation community, it's called NOTAMs. We talk about all that stuff in there. That's kind of just a quick brief to keep us updated for the day. And then from there, our day is pretty much on us to fill the time how we see fit other than when we're flying. So you might, on average, I say you get scheduled for one event a day, whether that event is a simulator mission or whether it's a actual flight mission, call those sorties. You typically get one, maybe two a day. If you get two a day, it's a busy day. It happens less frequently, but as pilot training goes on, you'll probably see a lot more of those. And what those flights look like are typically an hour for the brief. You'll fly in the T6. We do 1.7, 1.8 hour sorties, and then we'll debrief for anywhere from 15 minutes to an hour. It's definitely not as demanding as I thought it would. And funny enough, when I was on casual working with security forces, I actually thought I was working longer days and longer hours than when I started pilot training. So it was almost like I got a break when I started pilot training, which is kind of interesting.
All right, well, folks, that's gonna wrap up the first half of this episode. If you guys want to join back, we're gonna have a part 2 here in a minute. We're gonna take a quick break. We'll be right back. Thanks, Matt.
Absolutely.